Good morning to you. I'm Jessica Brown. Welcome to our Fall Book Chat edition. And today we are connecting with some local authors and storytellers about their latest work and taking a look at some other award-winning books. This year there are some provocative titles on the 25th annual Massachusetts Book Awards list. For fiction, The Naming Song by Jedediah Barry. It's a fantasy novel that explores the power of names. And the young adult category, Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear by Robin Wasley. It zeroes in on an ordinary teenager's challenge to fit into an extraordinary world. And this year's winner of notable contribution to publishing is Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's Indigenous Peoples: History of the United States, a graphic interpretation. It exposes an alternate view of the nation's founding and legacy of colonialism. And the nonfiction honor goes to We Refuse: A Forceful History of Black Resistance by Kelly Carter Jackson, Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at Wellesley College. And joining us now is Kelly Carter Jackson. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, and congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so honored. I'm thrilled.
Let's talk about this book, because this is incredible. We have learned, though, about Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence, right? How he advocated for a peaceful approach in the quest for civil rights. But there's so much more when it comes to the history of Black resistance. You talk about it in the book. You challenge that idea that Black resistance should always be nonviolent. Can you explain what you mean there?
Yeah, I think that we've gotten into these binaries where everything has to be either violent or nonviolent. And I wanted to expand that idea and to say, no, I think we have more than two tools. I think there's a lot of different ways that we can approach, opposing white supremacy and opposing fascism. And so each chapter is a different tool. I look at revolution and protection and force and flight and even joy. I look at joy as a weapon. Joy as a way of fighting back. And so I wanted to give myself and all of my readers more ways of sort of thinking about how can we expand these ideas, how can we build upon them, and how can we fight back effectively.
Let's talk more about those categories. You just mentioned them, right?
Yeah.
The book is divided into these categories: revolution, protection, force, flight, and joy. Let's start with revolution, beginning with the end of colonial rule in Haiti. Explain how that relates to Black resistance here in the U.S.
Oh, definitely. I think everything starts with the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution was so pivotal. For one, it wasn't just a revolution to free Haiti from French colonial control. It was really a revolution about freeing the enslaved. It was a revolution of abolition. And so when I think about it in that sense, I think it's the only revolution that's sort of truly revolutionary. The United States has a revolution, but slavery persists for another 100 plus years. The same with France. But when Haiti has its revolution, it abolishes slavery. It frees every man. And so I wanted to look at revolutions as not just reform, but revolutions as dismantling a system and then replacing that system with something new and just and good.
Yeah, and you explore that in the book. Let's talk about guns and gun violence. We know it disproportionately affects Black American communities, but you write about a different history when it comes to weapons, especially in regards to African American women.
Yeah.
Explain that a bit.
Yeah, I started that chapter actually talking about my grandmother. I did not grow up with guns in my household. We were not hunters or anything of that nature. And so when my grandmother passed away, we found that she kept a pistol in her nightstand.
And it was shock?
Yes, it was fully loaded. We were shocked. We were like, Grandma's got a gun? Like, we were stunned.
Yeah.
But it made a lot of sense. My grandmother was living in Detroit, but she was a Southerner. She was raised in Louisiana. She was raised during a time where lynchings were common, where racial violence was common, and you needed to be able to protect yourself at all times. And so I look at guns not so much as a weapon against white supremacy, but as a way of thinking about how do we protect ourselves and how do we protect our communities and the communities that we love.
I love that your personal discovery kind of prompted that as well. I find that really interesting. You also talk about the stories of little known everyday rebellions. What are some of your favorite ones that you came across?
There's so many stories. Like, what I loved about this book is that I selfishly got to put a lot of my family members in the book. And so the introduction starts out with the story of my great-grandmother, Arnesta, who when she was 9 years old, she stepped on a rusty nail. And her mother took her to the doctor to get her help because she was on the brink of death. And the doctor gives her this proposal. He says, I will heal her, but if I do, she has to come and live with me for the rest of her life, working for my family. And this is 1950. 15. So slavery had been over for 50 years. And my great-great-grandmother, Martha, refused. She said, absolutely not. And she picked up her ailing granddaughter, took her home, and really administered every natural remedy she could find. She refused that doctor's proposal, and she saved her granddaughter's life. And that really, for me, was just a metaphor of thinking about the whole book. Like, when we're faced up against these options of either death or slavery, how can we refuse those options? But also, how can we come up with our own alternatives, our own remedies to save our lives?
Interesting. You know, you also talk about in the book, you warn against the dangers of misremembering the past. What do you mean by that as well?
Oh gosh, I think we misremember so much, especially when it comes to either the Civil War or slavery or the long freedom struggle, the civil rights movement. I think we misremember Dr. King quite a bit. It happens.
Cherry pick some things. It's
we
true.
Cherry pick all the time, and we fail to realize that this was a person who was quite reviled at the end of his life, who was not just pushing for tactics to fight against racism, but really looking at human rights and really starting a Poor People's Campaign and thinking about how do we sort of attack this holistically. And I think that we have very much pigeonholed King into this person that feels very idealistic and not at all what he was actually accomplishing on the ground. And so I try to get readers to think beyond that and expose them to new ideas that they might not have thought about before. And I even talk about the fact that King's house was heavily armed. You know, he was always under threat, and that he also believed in protecting himself, and that those ideas are not sort of in opposition to one another, nonviolence and self-defense.
Yeah. It's not even just misremembering, it's also learning about those things. Some things, you know, not everyone knows the full story, so I think it's important to know. You mentioned it at the top about joy being a tool, right? You talk about the concepts of restorative joy and quiet strength as forms of resistance. Explain that, because I think when people think of joy, they're thinking, how can that be used as a tool to kind of to fight, you know?
I think we sometimes think of joy as happiness, but happiness is fleeting, it's ephemeral, it's not very deep, it's kind of shallow. But joy often is tethered to sorrow and to oppression and to really difficult, challenging moments. How do you sort of gather up your humanity and fight back against that? And Black people do that all the time. We have a strong tradition of finding joy, of finding laughter in things, of poking fun at things. So I talk about how we poke fun at racism. I talk about how we either tell stories, or we sing songs, or we cook meals, and we give care to one another. And that is fortifying. And so when I think about like how much I have to rely on joy in my own life, whether it's just playing with my children or going for a walk or finding ways to center myself, joy is a big part of that resistance.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. You know, I don't think you think about it like that. It's a great perspective. You've been described as fearless and not afraid to challenge prevailing wisdom. Do you feel like those are accurate descriptions?
Probably. A little bit. I mean, I am not afraid of conflict. Like I tell my friends all the time, like, don't threaten me with a good conflict. Like I like being not necessarily oppositional, but I like sort of expanding ideas and operating outside of binaries and trying to be creative and thinking about things that we probably haven't thought of before. I want to do all of those things. I kind of want to get people to think more expansively about how we can address white supremacy and how we can ultimately dismantle it. And yeah, I think you have to be fearless and courageous to do that work, but that's okay. We could all use a little bit more courage.
We appreciate you and your fearlessness. So thank you so much for being with us. Kelly Carter Jackson, you've been fantastic. I enjoyed this conversation so much. Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at Wellesley College. We Refuse. There's the book right there. You can check it out. Once again, it's an award-winning book. We Refuse: A Forceful History of Black Resistance.